The billionaire's friend ordered in French to laugh at his maid, until she spoke 9 languages. The crystal chandelier cast prismatic light across the marble floors of the Ashford estate, where 27-year-old Elena Martinez moved silently through the dining room, refilling water glasses with practiced precision. She'd worked as a housekeeper for Alexander Ashford for 8 months now, and she'd learned to make herself invisible, a shadow among the opulence. Tonight was different. Tonight, Alexander was entertaining. "More champagne, darling?" Vivian Cross, Alexander's 29-year-old fiancée, extended her glass without looking up, her diamond bracelet catching the light. Seated beside her, Marcus Bellamy, Alexander's oldest friend and business partner at 35, wore the satisfied smirk of someone who'd never questioned his place in the world. Elena approached with the bottle, her simple black uniform a stark contrast to Vivian's crimson silk gown. As she poured, she caught fragments of their conversation. Stock portfolios, yacht clubs, the tedium of choosing between St. Tropez and the Amalfi Coast. "God, I'm exhausted just thinking about the wedding preparations," Vivian sighed dramatically. "And the staff we'll need to hire for the reception. It's impossible to find good help these days." Marcus glanced at Elena, and something cruel flickered in his eyes. An idea forming. "Alexander, mon ami," Marcus began, switching to French with theatrical flair. "How do you tolerate having such simple people in your home? Look at her. She probably thinks Bordeaux is just a color." Alexander, 32 and handsome in that effortless way wealth permits, shifted uncomfortably. "Marcus, that's—" "Oh, don't be so sensitive," Marcus continued in French, warming to his performance. "I'm simply saying that it must be amusing, watching these people pretend to understand our world. She's probably never even left whatever little village she crawled out of." Vivian giggled, her French flawless from her years at Swiss boarding schools. "Marcus, you're terrible. Though I suppose you have a point. Can you imagine her trying to navigate a wine list?" Elena's hands remained steady as she set down the champagne bottle. Her face betrayed nothing. No hurt, no anger, no understanding. She simply nodded politely and stepped back. Marcus leaned forward conspiratorially, still in French. "You see?" Completely oblivious. "It's like talking in front of furniture. I bet she doesn't even know we're discussing her." "That's enough." Alexander's voice cut through the laughter, sharp and unexpected. He spoke in English now, his jaw tight. "Oh, come on, Alex," Marcus protested, also switching back to English. "I was just having a bit of fun. No harm done. She doesn't understand anyway." Elena cleared her throat softly. "Will there be anything else, Mr. Ashford?" Her voice was quiet, professional, accentless American English. Nothing in her demeanor suggested she'd understood a single word of the French conversation that had just transpired. But Alexander noticed something, the slightest tension in her shoulders, the way her eyes focused on a point just past his left ear rather than meeting his gaze. "No, Elena. Thank you. That will be all for tonight." She nodded and retreated to the kitchen, where she finally allowed herself to breathe. Her hands gripped the edge of the counter as the words replayed in her mind. Simple people. Little village. Oblivious. Like talking in front of furniture. It wasn't the first time she'd been dismissed, underestimated, treated as less than. But tonight it cut deeper, perhaps because she'd begun to hope that this position might be different. Alexander had always been kind, respectful. She'd foolishly thought that meant something. Through the kitchen door, she could hear them continuing their dinner, the conversation moving on as if she were already forgotten. She pulled off her apron with trembling fingers and hung it on its hook. Tomorrow was her day off. She'd spend it as she always did, at the library, or the community center where she volunteered, or perhaps at the bookstore where she could lose herself in words that understood her better than people ever had. Elena had learned long ago that the world made assumptions based on what it saw. They saw a maid in a black uniform, and they saw someone simple, someone forgettable, someone who existed only to serve their needs and disappear. What they couldn't see was the girl who taught herself to read by age 4, who devoured every book in her small-town library by age 12. They didn't see the teenager who'd stayed up late into the night, teaching herself languages from library books and free online resources, dreaming of worlds beyond the small Texas border town where she'd grown up. They didn't see the young woman who'd put herself through community college while working 3 jobs, or the student who'd earned a full scholarship to complete her bachelor's degree. They didn't see her at all. And that, Elena had learned, could be either a curse or a gift. Tonight it felt like a curse. But she'd learned something else in her 27 years. Pain was temporary, but knowledge was permanent. Every slight, every dismissal, every moment of being underestimated, she collected them all, transformed them into fuel. As she gathered her belongings to leave, she heard Marcus's laughter ring out from the dining room, and she made a decision. She'd been invisible long enough. She'd been underestimated for the last time. Tomorrow might be her day off, but Monday would be different. Monday, she'd begin to let them see exactly who Elena Martinez really was. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn clarity that made everything feel possible. Elena entered the Ashford estate through the service entrance at 6:30, as always, prepared to begin her day before the household stirred. But this Monday, Alexander was already in the kitchen. He stood by the espresso machine, still in his running clothes, looking uncertain. In 8 months, Elena had never seen him in the kitchen this early. Usually, his mornings began with her leaving his coffee outside his bedroom door at 7:15 sharp. "Elena," he said, turning as she entered. "I was hoping to catch you." She set down her bag, her expression polite but guarded. "Is something wrong, Mr. Ashford?" "About Friday night." He ran a hand through his hair, disheveling it in a way that made him look younger, less like the billionaire CEO and more like someone capable of genuine discomfort. Marcus was completely out of line. "I want to apologize." "You weren't the one speaking, Mr. Ashford." "No, but I should have stopped him sooner." "I should have," he paused, studying her face. "You knew we were talking about you." It wasn't a question. Elena met his gaze steadily, and for the first time, she didn't hide. "Yes. You understood. The French. Every word." Something shifted in Alexander's expression. Surprise, certainly, but also what looked like embarrassment. "How long have you understood French?" "Since I was 19. I spent 2 years studying it, among other languages." She moved past him to start her morning routine, pulling out the ingredients for his breakfast. "Will you still want your usual breakfast, Mr. Ashford? Or would you prefer something different?" He stared at her, this woman who'd been in his home for 8 months, who he'd never really seen. "Why didn't you say something when Marcus was?" "What would I have said?" Elena cracked eggs into a bowl with efficient precision. "Excuse me, sir, but I understand you're mocking me in French?" That would have been quite the scene. "You could have defended yourself. And risk my job?" She whisked the eggs, her movements controlled. "With all due respect, Mr. Ashford, people like Marcus Bellamy aren't interested in being proven wrong. They're interested in feeling superior. Confronting him would have accomplished nothing except making my position here uncomfortable." Alexander leaned against the counter, his coffee forgotten. "You're right. You're absolutely right, and that's terrible. It's the way the world works." Elena poured the eggs into the heated pan. "I learned that a long time ago." "What other languages do you speak?" The question hung in the air between them. Elena considered deflecting, maintaining the boundaries between employer and employee that had always existed. But something in his expression, genuine curiosity without condescension, made her answer honestly. "Spanish, obviously. It was my first language. English, French, Italian, German, Portuguese, Mandarin, Japanese. And I'm working on Arabic, though my pronunciation needs improvement." The spatula clattered against the pan as Alexander straightened. 9 languages? 8 fluently. 1 in progress. She plated his eggs, adding the toast and fresh fruit exactly as he liked it. "Your breakfast, Mr. Ashford." He didn't take the plate.
"How?"
"I mean, I'm sorry, that sounds wrong. I just mean that's extraordinary. How did you learn 9 languages?" Elena set the plate on the counter between them. Libraries offer free language learning resources. The internet has countless free courses. YouTube has native speakers teaching their languages. When you can't afford Rosetta Stone or private tutors, you find other ways. Why? The question came out softer now. Why languages specifically? For a moment, Elena was silent, debating how much to reveal. Then she thought of Marcus's laughter, of Vivian's casual cruelty, of every time someone had looked through her instead of at her. When I was little, my mother cleaned houses in our town. Sometimes she'd take me with her. I'd sit in corners with my books while she worked. Elena's voice remained steady, but something vulnerable crept into it. I noticed that the people in those houses, the wealthy ones, they spoke different languages. They'd switch to French or Italian when they didn't want the help to understand. They thought it made them sophisticated, special. She met Alexander's eyes directly. I decided that if knowledge was what separated people into those who served and those who were served, then I'd acquire as much knowledge as I possibly could. Languages were just the beginning. What else? Alexander asked, and he was truly listening now, not just hearing. I have a bachelor's degree in linguistics from UT Austin. Full scholarship. I graduated summa cum laude. She paused. I was accepted into a PhD program at Columbia. Full funding. The kitchen fell silent except for the quiet hum of the refrigerator. You were accepted to Columbia, Alexander repeated slowly. For a PhD. Yes. Then what are you doing here? It was the question Elena had asked herself 1,000 times in the quiet hours of the night. My mother got sick. Stage 4 cancer. She didn't have insurance. The treatments, the medications. Columbia couldn't wait. The funding was for that year only. So I chose. God, Elena. I'm so. She died anyway. Elena's voice didn't waver. 6 months after diagnosis. I'd given up Columbia. Spent every penny I had, and more I didn't have on treatments that bought her a few extra months of suffering. And then she was gone, and I was here, with medical debt I'll be paying off for the next decade. Alexander looked stricken. I had no idea. How could you? I'm the maid. You're not supposed to know my story. She picked up his breakfast plate again, holding it out. Your eggs are getting cold, Mr. Ashford. This time he took the plate, but he didn't move away. Why haven't you applied again? To Columbia or another program? With what money? What time? Elena began cleaning the kitchen, kneading the familiar motions. I work here 6 days a week. On Sundays, I tutor immigrant children in English at the community center for free because I remember what it's like to have a mother who couldn't navigate a country that didn't speak her language. I volunteer at the public library, helping adults learn to read. And in whatever hours are left, I sleep. You could ask for help. There are programs. Mr. Ashford. Elena stopped, her hands gripping the edge of the sink. Please don't. Don't tell me about opportunities one should pursue or programs I should know about. I've researched them all. I've applied to everything I'm eligible for. The world isn't short on advice for poor people about how to stop being poor. What it's short on is actual opportunities that don't require the one thing we don't have, time and money. The truth of it settled between them, uncomfortable and undeniable. I'm sorry, Alexander said finally. You're right. That was thoughtless. Elena nodded, accepting the apology, and they stood in silence for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter. I don't regret my choices, Mr. Ashford. I got 6 more months with my mother. I held her hand when she died. She knew she wasn't alone, wasn't abandoned. That's worth more than any degree. But it still hurts. Every single day. Elena turned to face him, and for the first time, she let him see the full weight of what she carried. So, when your friend makes jokes about simple people from little villages, yes, I understand. And yes, it hurts. But I also know something he doesn't. What's that? That being underestimated is sometimes the greatest advantage you can have. The revelation in the kitchen changed something fundamental between Alexander and Elena, though both tried to pretend otherwise. She continued her work with the same efficiency, the same professional distance. He continued to leave for the office, to take his calls, to live his life. But awareness had been introduced, and awareness, once present, couldn't be ignored. Wednesday afternoon, Elena was organizing Alexander's study, a room filled with first editions he'd never read and art he'd inherited rather than chosen, when raised voices echoed from the front hall. "It's not negotiable, Vivian." Alexander's voice, strained with an irritation Elena had never heard before. "You're being ridiculous. It's just a wedding. Everyone has planners and coordinators. You're acting like I'm committing a crime by wanting our day to be perfect." Elena moved to leave, to give them privacy, but Vivian's next words stopped her. "And I don't understand why you're suddenly so concerned about the staff. They're servants, Alexander.
They do their jobs."
"Since when do you care what they think?" The silence that followed was heavy enough that Elena could feel it from the next room. "Since I realized I've been sleepwalking through my own life," Alexander said quietly. "Since I realized I've surrounded myself with people who think kindness is a weakness and compassion is quaint." "Is this about Friday?" "About Marcus's joke." Vivian's laugh was sharp. "Oh my God, you're serious. You're actually upset because Marcus made a comment about the help." "Her name is Elena. And yes, I'm upset that my fiancé and my oldest friend thought it was entertaining to mock someone who couldn't defend herself. She's the maid, Alexander. She has a degree from UT Austin. She was accepted to Columbia for a PhD. She speaks 9 languages. She tutors children for free on her only day off." His voice rose with each statement. "She's more educated than anyone who was sitting at that table Friday night, and we treated her like she was invisible." Elena's hands stilled on the book she'd been shelving. She shouldn't be hearing this. She should announce herself, or leave, or do something other than stand frozen, listening to Alexander Ashford defend her to his fiancé. "So what?" Vivian's voice turned cold. "So, what if she has degrees? She's still cleaning your house. That's the choice she made. Her mother was dying of cancer. She chose to save her mother instead of her career. That's not a failure, Vivian. That's love. Something I'm not sure you'd recognize." The words fell like stones into still water. "How dare you?" Vivian whispered. "I dare because I'm tired. I'm tired of performing wealth. I'm tired of pretending that money makes us better than other people. I'm tired of you and Marcus, and this entire life where we mistake cruelty for sophistication." Elena heard footsteps, sharp and angry. "If you're having doubts about the wedding, Alexander, perhaps you should have mentioned it before we sent out 300 invitations." Vivian's voice shook with rage. "But don't you dare blame me because you're suddenly having some kind of quarter-life crisis about the meaning of your existence." "Maybe that's exactly what this is," Alexander said. "And maybe it's long overdue." The front door slammed hard enough to rattle the windows. Elena waited, barely breathing, until she heard Alexander's footsteps retreat to his private quarters on the second floor. Only then did she allow herself to move. She shouldn't have heard that. She definitely shouldn't have been affected by it. Alexander Ashford's relationship troubles were none of her concern. She was the housekeeper. She cleaned, she cooked, she maintained the smooth operation of his household, and then she left. But her hands trembled as she reshelved the books. That evening, Elena was preparing to leave when Alexander appeared in the kitchen doorway. He looked exhausted, his tie loosened, and his hair disheveled from running his hands through it. "Elena, do you have a moment?" "Of course, Mr. Ashford." He gestured to the kitchen table, the same table where she ate her solitary lunches. "Would you sit, please?" Elena hesitated, then complied. Alexander sat across from her, and the informality of it felt strange, wrong somehow. "Employers didn't sit with the help." "I owe you another apology," he began. "You heard the argument with Vivian." "I did. I'm sorry. I should have made myself known."
"No."
He held up a hand. "I'm not apologizing for that. I'm apologizing because I used your story, your life, as ammunition in an argument. That wasn't fair to you." Elena absorbed this, surprised by his awareness. "You were defending me." "I was defending my own conscience," he corrected gently. "There's a difference. I was trying to make myself feel better about being complicit in how you've been treated. That's not the same as actually treating you better." The honesty of it disarmed her completely. In her experience, Wealthy people rarely examined their own motivations this closely. What do you want from me, Mr. Ashford? He leaned back, considering the question. The truth? I don't know. Maybe I want to understand how someone with your intelligence, your capabilities, ended up here. Maybe I want to make sense of a world where that's even possible. Or maybe... He paused, meeting her eyes. Maybe I want to know who you really are. Why does it matter? Because I've spent 32 years being told that my life is meaningful because I have money and power. But you've spent 27 years acquiring knowledge and skills that I can't even comprehend, and you're invisible. That seems fundamentally wrong. Elena stood, needing distance. Mr. Ashford, I appreciate your concern, but I don't need your pity or your philosophical crisis.
I need my job.
And conversations like this blur lines that should stay clear. You're right. Alexander stood as well. I'm sorry. Again. I seem to be making a habit of apologizing to you. It's better than the alternative, Elena said, a hint of dry humor entering her voice. He smiled just slightly. I suppose it is. He paused at the doorway. For what it's worth, Elena, I meant what I said to Vivian. What you did for your mother. That took more courage than anything I've ever done. After he left, Elena stood alone in the kitchen, staring at the chair where Alexander Ashford, billionaire, had sat across from her like an equal. It scared her, how much those words had meant. How much she'd wanted to believe them. Because wanting anything from this world, from these people, was dangerous. She'd learned that lesson before. She couldn't afford to forget it now. 3 weeks passed in a strange new equilibrium. Alexander and Vivian's engagement remained intact, though Elena noticed Vivian came to the house less frequently. Marcus still visited, but Alexander no longer invited him to stay for dinner. And Alexander himself changed in subtle ways, asking Elena's opinion on things, having actual conversations rather than simply issuing polite instructions. It was unprecedented and dangerous. Then came the invitation. The humanitarian gala? Elena stared at the embossed card Alexander had placed in her hands. I don't understand. It's a fundraiser I'm hosting. 500 guests, all very wealthy, all very boring. Alexander leaned against the kitchen counter in what had become his habit during their morning conversations. The cause is literacy programs for underprivileged communities. I need someone there who actually cares about education, not just the tax write-off. You have an entire staff of event planners who care about napkin colors and seating charts. Elena, these people are going to donate millions of dollars to a cause they don't understand. Shouldn't at least one person in the room know why it actually matters? Elena set down the invitation like it might burn her. Mr. Ashford, I'm the housekeeper. I can't attend your gala as a guest. Why not? Because... She gestured helplessly. Because that's not how this works. There are rules. Social boundaries. I'd be completely out of place. You speak 9 languages. You have a degree from one of the best universities in the country. You were accepted to an Ivy League PhD program. Alexander's voice was gentle but insistent. The only reason you'd be out of place is because we've created a system that says money determines worth. I'm asking you to challenge that system with me. Easy for you to say. You're not the one who'd be humiliated if this goes wrong. Then we won't let it go wrong. He pulled something from his pocket, a credit card. Get a dress. Get your hair done. Send me the bill. Come to the gala, talk to people about why literacy programs matter, and let me introduce you as what you are, one of the most educated people I know. Elena stared at the credit card, understanding the enormity of what he was offering. This wasn't charity. This was recognition. Visibility. The chance to be seen. It terrified her. I can't accept this, she whispered. Yes, you can. The question is, will you? That Saturday, Elena stood in front of her apartment mirror, barely recognizing herself. The dress was midnight blue, simple but elegant, nothing like the uniforms she wore daily. Her dark hair, usually pulled back severely, fell in soft waves around her shoulders. She looked like someone who belonged at a gala. She looked like someone she used to dream of being. The car Alexander sent arrived at 7. By 7:30, She was standing in the grand ballroom of the Ashford Plaza Hotel, surrounded by more wealth than she'd earn in 10 lifetimes, trying not to hyperventilate. Elena. Alexander appeared at her elbow, devastatingly handsome in his tuxedo, Vivian glittering on his other arm. "You look beautiful." Vivian's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Yes, very transformed." Before Elena could respond, Marcus Bellamy materialized from the crowd, champagne in hand. His eyes widened when he saw her. "I'm sorry, have we met?" He extended his hand automatically, not recognizing her outside of her uniform. Elena felt Alexander tense beside her. This was the moment. She could demur, stay silent, remain invisible, or she could step into the light. She took Marcus's hand, her grip firm. "We have, actually. Several times." Elena Martinez. She watched recognition slowly dawn in his eyes, followed by confusion, then embarrassment.
Oh.
You're Alexander's." Elena was accepted to Columbia for a PhD in linguistics, Alexander interrupted smoothly. "She's here tonight as my guest and advisor on the literacy initiative." Marcus's face cycled through several emotions before settling on forced politeness. "How wonderful." Vivian's laugh was brittle. "Alexander, really? You can't just bring the staff to these events. What will people think?" "They'll think I invited someone who actually understands the cause we're supposedly supporting," Alexander replied, his voice carrying an edge Elena had never heard before. "Elena, shall we make the rounds? There are several foundation directors I'd like you to meet." As he guided her away, Elena heard Vivian hiss something to Marcus, but she forced herself not to look back. Alexander's hand at her elbow was steady, grounding. "You didn't have to do that," she murmured. "Yes, I did. And we're just getting started." The next hour was surreal. Alexander introduced her to politicians, philanthropists, celebrities, not as his housekeeper, but as an expert in linguistics and education. And Elena, drawing on years of study and lived experience, talked about literacy gaps, about immigrant communities struggling with English, about children who couldn't access the resources they needed to succeed. She spoke about her mother, who'd cleaned houses but never learned to read English fluently, about the community center classes, about why throwing money at a problem wasn't enough if you didn't understand the people you were trying to help. People listened. Actually listened. A foundation director pressed his card into her hand, asking her to consult on their program design. A journalist asked to interview her for an article. A school superintendent invited her to speak at a conference. And through it all, Alexander stayed close, not hovering but present, his pride in her evident. It was almost midnight when disaster struck. Elena was speaking with a group of donors about language acquisition theory when Vivian's voice cut through the conversation, sharp and loud enough to turn heads. "I think it's time we were honest about what's really happening here." The ballroom seemed to quiet, attention shifting to where Vivian stood, champagne glass in hand, her carefully maintained composure cracking. Alexander isn't interested in literacy programs. He's interested in playing savior to the help. Vivian's voice dripped with contempt. "Elena isn't a guest. She's his housekeeper. She cleans his toilets. And he's parading her around like some kind of project, some proof that he's different from the rest of us." The silence was absolute. Elena felt every eye in the room turn to her, felt the shift in how they saw her. Not an expert. Not a consultant. The help. "Vivian, that's enough." Alexander's voice was low, dangerous. "Is it? Because I'm tired of pretending this is normal. You're engaged to me, Alexander."
To me.
"But you've been obsessed with her for weeks, defending her, elevating her, and for what? To prove some point about class warfare?" Elena wanted to disappear, to become invisible again. But she'd been seen now, and there was no going back. "You're right," she heard herself say. Her voice didn't shake. "I am his housekeeper. I do clean his house. And you're right that there's a power imbalance here that's complicated." She looked directly at Vivian, then at Alexander, then out at the hundreds of faces watching this drama unfold. "But being a housekeeper doesn't make me less educated. It doesn't make my opinions on literacy programs less valid. It doesn't make me less human." Elena's voice grew stronger. What it makes me is someone who knows what it's like to work 3 jobs to pay for school. Someone who knows what it's like to choose between paying rent and buying textbooks. Someone who knows exactly why programs like this matter, because I'm not speaking from theory, I'm speaking from experience. She turned to Alexander. You didn't need to rescue me, Mr. Ashford. I've been saving myself my entire life. But you did something maybe more important. You saw me. You recognized that someone's job title doesn't define their worth. That's what tonight was supposed to be about. Elena set down her champagne glass and looked out at the assembled wealth and power. I hope some of you heard something tonight that mattered. That your donations go to programs that actually help people, not just make you feel better about your tax brackets. If you did, then this wasn't a waste. If you didn't, then I hope someday you meet someone who shows you why it should matter. She turned to leave, dignity intact, head high. Elena, wait. Alexander's voice stopped her. But it was Marcus who spoke next, his voice carrying across the silent ballroom. She's right. Everyone turned to stare at him. Marcus approached Elena, his face flushed but earnest. I owe you an apology. A real one. In front of all these people, because that's where I humiliated you. In front of people, in a language I thought you wouldn't understand. I was cruel because it made me feel superior, and you didn't deserve that. He paused. You deserve better than any of us have given you. The moment stretched, fragile and unprecedented. Then Elena did something that surprised everyone, including herself. She smiled. Apology accepted, Mr. Bellamy. Thank you. The gala ended in whispers and speculation, but Elena left with something she hadn't expected: respect. The business cards in her purse, the interview requests, the consulting opportunities, they were real. They represented a door opening, a chance at the life she'd sacrificed. But Monday morning, she still returned to the Ashford estate at 6:30. Still put on her uniform. Still started the coffee. Because pride didn't pay medical debt. Dignity didn't cover rent. She was in the kitchen when Alexander found her, his tie already loosened though it was barely 8 in the morning. He looked like he hadn't slept. We need to talk, he said. Mr. Ashford. I called off the engagement. The words came out in a rush. Sunday morning I told Vivian it was over. She's already moved her things out of the house. Elena's hand stilled on the coffee pot. Why are you telling me this? Because I need you to understand something.
This isn't about you.
Or, it's not only about you. Alexander ran his hand through his hair in that gesture she'd come to recognize as frustration. Vivian was right about one thing. I've been obsessed. But not with you specifically. With understanding how I've been living my life. He moved to the window, staring out at the manicured grounds. My father built this company from nothing. He came from poverty, worked his way up, and he never forgot where he came from. But somewhere between his generation and mine, we forgot. I forgot. I turned wealth into a wall instead of a responsibility. Mr. Ashford. Alexander.
Please.
I think we're past formalities, don't you? Elena set down the coffee pot carefully. What do you want from me? I want to offer you a job. A real one. He turned to face her. Not as my housekeeper. As the director of the Ashford Foundation's education initiatives. Salary of $200,000 a year, full benefits, a budget to actually make a difference. You design programs, hire staff, work with communities, everything you talked about at the gala. The air left Elena's lungs. $200,000? It's less than what you're worth, but it's what the budget allows right now. We can renegotiate as the foundation grows. He pulled out a folder. I had my lawyers draw up the contract. It's real, Elena. Not charity. Not pity. A job offer based on your qualifications. Elena took the folder with trembling hands. The contract was real. Professional. Everything she'd ever wanted. Why? She whispered. Because Saturday night, I watched you command a room full of billionaires and politicians. I watched you turn your pain into purpose, your struggle into expertise. And I realized that I've been sitting on resources that could change lives while people like you, people with actual knowledge and passion, are cleaning houses to survive. He paused. That's not noble. That's obscene. So, this is guilt?
No.
It's recognition. There's a difference. Alexander moved closer, but didn't touch her. I can't undo the systems that put us in these different positions. I was born wealthy and you had to fight for everything. That's not fair, and one job offer doesn't fix it. But I can use what I have to create opportunities for people who deserve them. Starting with you. Elena looked down at the contract, at the number that would wipe out her debt, that would give her security, that would let her do work that actually mattered. It was everything. And if I say no, she asked quietly. Alexander blinked. What? If I say no, what happens? Do I keep my job as housekeeper? Or does this become uncomfortable and I end up unemployed? You keep your job. Absolutely. Elena, I'm not trying to manipulate you. If you're happier cleaning houses, if that's genuinely what you want, then nothing changes. She believed him. That was the dangerous part. I need time to think about it, she said finally. Of course. Take all the time you need. But they both knew time wasn't really the issue. The issue was what accepting this job would mean. Stepping into a world she'd never quite belonged to, taking opportunities from someone whose path to them had been paved with wealth rather than earned through struggle, becoming visible in a way that couldn't be undone. That night, Elena sat in her small apartment, the contract on her table, and called her best friend Maria, another housekeeper, someone who knew exactly what her life was like. Are you insane? Maria demanded when Elena explained the situation. Elena, this is a miracle. You take that job. But what if I fail? What if I'm not ready? I don't have my PhD. I don't have experience running a foundation. Stop it. Maria's voice was fierce. Stop talking yourself out of this because you're scared. You've been qualified for opportunities like this your entire life. The world just never gave them to you. Now someone is, and you're going to say yes because that's what our mothers sacrificed for. So we could have chances they never did. Elena closed her eyes, thinking of her mother, of all the houses she'd cleaned, of the way she'd smile when Elena told her about school, about books, about dreams. She'd want you to take it, Maria said softly. You know she would. I know. So. Elena looked at the contract again, at the signature line waiting for her pen. So, I'm terrified. Good. That means it matters. Tuesday morning, Elena wore her uniform for the last time. She made Alexander's coffee, prepared his breakfast, and set both on the kitchen table where he'd asked to meet her. When he arrived, she slid the signed contract across the table. I have conditions, she said. Relief washed over his face. Name them. I report to the foundation board, not to you personally. I need independence to do this job right, without anyone thinking I'm just following your instructions. The foundation needs credibility, and it won't have that if people think I'm your project. Agreed. What else? I want to hire from communities that need these programs. Not just people with fancy degrees. People with experience, with perspective. People who've lived what we're trying to fix. Absolutely. And I want transparency. Full budget disclosure. Open reporting on outcomes. Real accountability. If programs don't work, we shut them down and try something else. No continuing things just because they make donors feel good. Alexander was smiling now. Is that everything?
No.
Elena met his eyes. I need you to understand that I'm doing this because I'm qualified, not because of whatever this is between us. The air in the kitchen changed. What is this between us? Alexander asked quietly. I don't know. Complicated. But it can affect my work. I won't be the woman who slept her way into a position. Elena. He reached across the table, stopping just short of taking her hand. I would never. This job is yours because you earned it. Anything else?
He paused.
Anything else has to wait until you're not working for me in any capacity. Until the power dynamic is completely different. I won't blur that line. She hadn't expected that. Hadn't expected him to name the problem she'd been too afraid to articulate. Thank you, she said softly.
No. Thank you for taking a chance on this.
On the foundation. On believing that maybe sometimes the system can change. 6 months later, Elena stood in front of the board of the Ashford Foundation, presenting results from their first quarter of programming. The conference room was full of wealthy donors, foundation directors, and community leaders. And Elena commanded the room with the same confidence she'd shown at the gala, but now backed by data, by results, by proof. Our adult literacy program has enrolled 847 participants across 5 cities, she explained, walking them through the presentation. But more importantly, 73% are still actively attending after 3 months, nearly double the national average retention rate. The difference is simple. We hired teachers from the communities we serve, people who understand the barriers our students face because they've lived them. She clicked to the next slide, showing photographs of classroom scenes. This is Maria Santos, one of our lead instructors in Houston. She was a housekeeper for 15 years. Now she teaches English to women like herself. Women who clean houses during the day and come to our classes at night, dreaming of better futures for their children. Elena caught Alexander's eye. He sat at the back of the room, having recused himself from the board to avoid any appearance of impropriety. He was smiling. Our youth programming has seen similar success, Elena continued. We've partnered with 12 schools in underserved areas, providing after-school language instruction in Spanish, Mandarin, and Arabic. Not just teaching languages, but teaching kids that being multilingual is an asset, not a deficit. That their heritage languages have value. A board member raised her hand. The budget shows you've allocated significant funds to stipends for participants. Can you explain that decision? Of course. We pay our adult students $20 per class attended. Because the reality is that the woman working 2 jobs doesn't have time to improve her English if that time comes at the cost of feeding her children. We're not just teaching, we're investing in people's ability to learn. That's not traditional, another board member noted, though not critically. No, it's not. But traditional programs have a 40% retention rate. Ours is at 73%. We're paying for results. The meeting continued for another hour, with Elena fielding questions, defending decisions, and demonstrating exactly why Alexander had been right to hire her. When it ended, the board approved her budget expansion request, $3 million to extend programming to 10 additional cities. As people filed out, Alexander lingered. "You were brilliant," he said when they were alone. "I was prepared. There's a difference." But Elena was smiling. They'd settled into a new normal over the past 6 months. Elena ran the foundation with complete autonomy. Alexander maintained his distance, their interactions professional and appropriate. The tension between them hadn't disappeared, but they'd built something else around it. Respect, partnership, friendship. It was enough. Most days. "Dinner?" Alexander asked. "To celebrate the budget approval? There's a new Italian place downtown that supposedly..." Alexander. Elena's voice was gentle but firm. "We can't. It's just dinner. 2 colleagues celebrating a professional achievement." "Is it?" She met his eyes. "Be honest." He was quiet for a long moment. "No. It's not." "Then we can't. Not yet. Maybe not ever." Elena gathered her materials. "The foundation is too important. What we're building matters too much to risk it on whatever this is." "And if I told you I'm willing to risk it?" Elena's heart stuttered, but she forced herself to be practical. "Then I'd say you're thinking like someone who's never had to choose between love and survival." "I have. And I'll choose survival every time, because that's what I've had to do my entire life." "Elena." "I'm not saying never," she interrupted. "I'm saying not now. The foundation needs to be established, credible, independent of any personal relationship between us. In a year, maybe 2, when no one can question whether I earned my position." She paused. "Ask me again, then." Alexander absorbed this, and she could see him wrestling with it. But then he nodded. "A year. Maybe 2. I'll wait." He moved toward the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, Elena, you're the strongest person I've ever met." After he left, Elena sat alone in the conference room, allowing herself a moment to feel everything she'd just pushed away. Because she'd been honest, she didn't know if it would be a year or 2 years, or if the timing would ever be right. What she did know was that she'd built something real. something that mattered. And she wouldn't sacrifice that on the altar of a relationship that might not survive the complications of their different worlds. But that didn't mean it didn't hurt. 3 months later, Elena was at the community center where it had all started, where she still volunteered every Sunday teaching English. She was helping a woman named Rosa with pronunciation when Marcus Bellamy walked through the door. Elena stared. Marcus Bellamy didn't belong in community centers in working-class neighborhoods. "I'm sorry to interrupt," he said, looking genuinely uncomfortable. "Could I speak with you for a moment?" Elena excused herself from Rosa and followed Marcus outside. "What are you doing here?" she asked. "I saw an article about your foundation's work. About this center, specifically." He shifted awkwardly. "I wanted to see it for myself." "Why?" Marcus was quiet for a moment, staring at the modest building with its chipped paint and outdated signage. "Because I've been thinking about what you said at the gala. About how my donations should go to programs that actually help people, not just make me feel better about my tax bracket." Elena waited, sensing there was more. "I have a niece," Marcus continued. "She's 7. Smart kid, really smart. But she's struggling in school because she doesn't speak English well. Her mother is from Brazil. And I realized that if she lived in a different neighborhood, had different opportunities, she'd have programs like yours. But because I'm wealthy, because I can afford private tutors, I never thought about what families without those resources need." He finally looked at Elena. "I want to help. With the foundation. Not just money, though I'll donate that too. But I want to actually understand what you're doing. Learn from you. Maybe even volunteer here, if you'd let me." Elena studied him, looking for signs of insincerity, of performance. But what she saw was genuine discomfort, genuine desire to do better. "Saturday mornings," she said finally. "We need reading tutors. You show up, you help whoever needs it, and you don't tell them you're a billionaire. You're just Marcus, a volunteer." "I can do that." "And Marcus." Elena's voice softened. "Bring your niece. Let her see that learning Portuguese and English isn't a deficit. It's a gift." His eyes welled up slightly. "Thank you." Watching him leave, Elena felt something shift. This was bigger than her and Alexander, bigger than personal redemptions or romantic possibilities. This was about creating a world where someone's worth wasn't determined by their bank account, where opportunities were based on merit and need rather than birth and privilege. It was the world her mother had wanted for her. The world she was building, one program, one student, one changed mind at a time. That evening, her phone rang. "Alexander. I heard Marcus visited the community center," he said without preamble. "News travels fast. He called me. He was different. Humbled. He said you gave him a chance to do better." Alexander paused. "You're changing people, Elena. Not just through the programs, but through how you treat them. You see the best in people even when they haven't earned it." "I see the potential in people," Elena corrected, "because someone once saw it in me." The silence that followed was comfortable, intimate. "How much longer?" Alexander asked quietly. Elena smiled, even though he couldn't see it. 8 months. The foundation will be a year old. That feels right. 8 months, he repeated. "I can wait 8 months. Alexander? Yeah. It's not a promise. You understand that, right? 8 months from now, we might discover we work better as colleagues than as anything else." "I know. But I also know what I feel. And I'm willing to wait to find out if you feel it too." After they hung up, Elena sat in her small apartment. The same apartment, because she was using most of her salary to pay down her mother's medical debt and let herself imagine. Not just 8 months from now, but years from now. A foundation that changed lives across the country. A career built on merit and meaning. And maybe, possibly, a relationship with someone who saw her, truly saw her, and valued what he saw. It wasn't the future she'd planned when she'd taken that housekeeping job. But it was better. Because it was real, earned, built on her own terms. The next Sunday, Elena was teaching at the community center when she saw something that made her stop mid-sentence. Through the window, Alexander's car pulled up. Not to pick her up or check on things. To drop off Marcus and his 7-year-old niece for the tutoring session. And Alexander didn't leave. He parked, got out, and walked toward the entrance. When he came through the door, Elena raised an eyebrow. "I'm here to volunteer," he said simply. "If you'll have me. Not as a donor or a board member. Just as someone who wants to help." Rosa, the woman Elena had been tutoring, looked between them with knowing eyes. "Is this the man you told me about? The one worth waiting for?" Elena felt her face heat. "Rosa, I knew it. You have that look." Rosa patted Elena's hand. "Go on, put him to work. Let's see if he's as good as you say." So Elena did. She put Alexander Ashford, Billionaire CEO, to work teaching basic English to adults who'd spent their lives being invisible to people like him. And she watched as he stumbled through it, as he grew frustrated with his own inadequacy, as he slowly began to understand what she'd known all along, that teaching, like learning, required humility. At the end of the session, as volunteers cleaned up, Alexander found her. "I was terrible at that," he admitted. "You were. But you kept trying. That counts for something. Will you let me come back next week?" Elena considered him, this man who'd started as her employer, who'd seen her when the world was determined to keep her invisible, who was willing to wait for a possibility rather than demand certainty. "Yeah," she said softly. "You can come back." And in that moment, in a modest community center in a working-class neighborhood, Elena Martinez understood that she'd done more than change her own life. She'd created space for change itself, for people like Marcus to grow, for people like Alexander to learn, for people like herself to rise. The world still wasn't fair. Money still opened doors that merit alone couldn't. But she'd wedged her foot in one of those doors, and she was holding it open for everyone coming behind her. 8 months later, when Alexander asked her to dinner again, Elena said yes. Not because the time was finally right, but because she'd built a life she was proud of, a foundation that would survive regardless of what happened between them. She was no longer choosing between survival and love. For the first time, she was choosing both. And that, Elena thought as she got ready for their first real date, was its own kind of revolution. 2 years after that first dinner, Elena stood at a podium in front of 2,000 educators at the National Literacy Conference. The Ashford Foundation's programs had expanded to 40 cities. Her adult literacy model had been adopted by organizations nationwide. She'd published papers, advised policymakers, and changed thousands of lives. And in the audience, in the back row so as not to distract, sat Alexander. Still waiting, still watching, still believing in what they were building together, both the foundation and something more personal, something precious. Also in the audience, Marcus and his niece, now 9 and fully bilingual. Rosa, who'd completed her GED and started college. Maria, now the foundation's operations director. Dozens of teachers, students, and volunteers whose lives had intersected with Elena's vision. "We talk a lot about opportunity," Elena said to the assembled educators. "About giving people chances. But real opportunity isn't charity. It's recognition. It's seeing worth where others see invisible people. It's understanding that the woman cleaning your house might speak 9 languages, that the man teaching your children might have been invisible yesterday, that potential exists everywhere. We just have to be willing to see it." She paused, looking out at the crowd. "I was that invisible person once. Someone chose to see me. Now I'm asking you to see the invisible people in your own lives, and not just see them, create pathways for them to be seen by everyone else too. Because that's how we change the world. One recognition at a time." The applause was thunderous. But what mattered more to Elena was what happened after, in the quiet moment when Alexander found her backstage. "That was incredible," he said. "It was honest." Elena smiled. "So, about that dinner you've been promising me for 2 years. Tonight," he asked hopefully.
"Tonight," she agreed.
Because she'd learned something in her journey from invisible to essential. The most powerful transformations weren't the dramatic reveals or the big moments. They were the quiet decisions to see each other truly, to value people for who they were rather than what they had, to build something meaningful together. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, those quiet decisions led to love. But even if they didn't, they led to something equally important. A life lived with purpose, dignity, and the knowledge that you'd made the world just a little bit better than you found it. For Elena Martinez, that was more than enough. It was everything.